Hi friends, I want to tell you about bumblebees. This is my bumblebee. It flies from a flower to another flower. Bumblebees are important. When bumblebees fly from one flower to the next flower and they land on a flower, they're pollinating a flower. And I'm going to do kind of an experiment tonight. It's a science experiment. I know you love science, to show and share about pollination and how that happens with flowers and why it's important that flowers get pollinated. We know that flowers have seeds, and we know that seeds are important because when you plant a seed, a new flower grows or a new plant grows. So when the bumblebee flies from one flower to another flower, it's taking the pollen from this flower to another flower, and it's fertilizing or giving food, pollinating the seeds, and the seeds need to be pollinated for another flower to grow. So in my experiment tonight, I just kind of drew this flower and I didn't color it in. You'll see why in just a moment. And then I'm going to pretend that this is a flower, and I'm going to pretend I'm using Cheetos tonight in my science experiment. But I'm going to pretend that this cup is a flower and I put some Cheetos in it. And I'm going to pretend that this cup is a flower and I put some Cheetos in it. And I'm going to pretend that this cup is a flower and I put some Cheetos in it. Okay? So now here's my bumblebee, and my bumblebee is going to fly. And it's going to fly and it's going to land on this flower. And it's going to spend some time there, and it's going to move around in this flower, and it's sucking up the nectar. And as it's sucking up the nectar, the juice in the flower, it's also getting on its feet some of the dust. Some of the dust from the flower is going on its feet. Then it's going to fly to another flower. It's going to land there, and it's going to drink up some nectar and stay there for a little while. And as it's moving around on this flower, it's getting some of the dust from the middle of the flower, the pollen, on its feet. It's going to fly to another flower. And it's going to drink some of the nectar from that flower. And as it lands there, it's going to get some of the dust from the flower, the pollen, on its feet. So the Cheetos are kind of like the pollen. Think of the Cheetos as the pollen. Then, when it comes and it lands, I'm going to move these over. When it comes and it lands over on this flower, here's what happens. Because it's been in this flower and this flower and this flower, and it's got, look at my fingers. What happens when you put your hands in Cheetos? Some of that Cheeto dust goes on your fingers. Okay, well, he's got pollen on his feet. I have pollen. Pretend that my hand is this bumblebee. So when it goes to this flower and it lands there, look at that. Some of the pollen, the dust from the other flowers, lands on this flower. And it fertilizes that flower. It pollinates that flower. So at home, I hope that, if you have a bag of Cheetos, I hope that this helps you, makes you think about bees and pollination, and that when a bee is flying from flower to flower to flower, think about when you're eating Cheetos, the dust that you get on your fingers from Cheetos is kind of a simulation of the pollen dust that gets on the bumblebee's feet. And as it flies from flower to flower, it's doing its important work in pollinating that flower. I hope you have a great evening. Bye-bye.